I'm Antonio Tijerino, President and CEO of the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. I'm proud to be part of providing this critical information during this time of crisis, thanks to our year-round partnership with Nationwide. Before this pandemic hit us, we were on track to unveil a year-long in-person campaign around financial empowerment with a multi-city tour and a podcast with Nationwide and several leaders in the field, some of whom are on this charla. We have always prided ourselves as an organization on being nimble, adaptable, and ready to leverage technology to continue to serve our community. And we've been able to do that through these charlas and other activities that we've been doing virtually. Now more than ever, the need for financial wellness is important. I mean, it's absolutely critical. It's hit our communities hard, especially Latino and African American communities. I imagine some of you on this call may have experienced a loss of income or business or are anxious about it. I know I haven't slept well for the past couple of months. Some of you are about to graduate and looking for opportunities, and others just want to know how to make the most of your finances in these trying times. I actually asked my wife to join for that reason, to just look out for our household, because we're going to be sharing information that we can use in our everyday lives. And others may just want to know how to make the most of your finances in these trying times, which I said before. This is why we do these charlas on all these topics. We've been doing them for mental health issues, financial health issues, to educating your kids at home, to other things that we're dealing with as a community. We want to be able to comfort, inform, and connect you, but also listen to you. And we're listening. I want to thank our charla speakers for providing us with expertise, with advice, and to be able to answer our questions as we all work on getting on a better financial path during and post-COVID. And that's a very important distinction. We're in a crisis, but post-COVID, we're going to have to adapt because that crisis is going to linger. So let me introduce our first speaker at Power Forward from Nationwide. Please welcome my friend, Lou Yarbrough III. Lou, thank you and Nationwide for your relentless commitment to our community. And this charla is another example. Lou?
Well, thank you, Tony. For those of you on the phone, my name is Lou Yarbrough. I am the Associate Vice President of Diverse and Cause Marketing for Nationwide. And Nationwide is proud to partner with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation to offer this virtual charla today as part of our Financial Empowerment Charla campaign that will launch later this year. You know, when we set out to plan and planned this program, it was our intent to provide you with experts as well as tools to help you in your journey to financial wellness. And as Tony said, you know, financial wellness is arguably more important today than it was even just a few weeks ago. And we also acknowledge that the Hispanic community has been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. And so we're here to extend, in a small way, our help in supporting and trying to work through this together. You know, Nationwide is a strong and stable company, but more important than that, we are a company that has a heart for our members, for our partners in the communities in which we live and work. And this partnership with the HHF reinforces our commitment to the Hispanic community during this uncertain time, as well as beyond. We are so honored to be part of this virtual charla today and the outstanding lineup of Hispanic leaders and experts who will be sharing their knowledge and wisdoms with us today. One of those speakers will also serve as the moderator for today, Mr. Paul Roldan. He's originally from New York City. He received his bachelor's degree from Princeton University and a graduate degree from Harvard. After working at the Federal Reserve Bank as a financial analyst, he moved to Orlando to help his ailing mother. And while there, he was confronted with a totally different type of economy. And that started his journey as an entrepreneur in the financial services business. And he is now the CEO of AllGen Financial. So with that, I want to introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Paul Roldan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Antonio and Lou, for that great start. We're excited to be here today. And we're looking forward to some great information being shared and for you, the participants, to hopefully get some great nuggets to be able to apply to your life or someone that you know. Again, my name is Paul Roldan. I'm the co-founder and partner of AllGen Financial Advisors. And I have the pleasure and honor of moderating today's charla. So thank you again all for joining. So Loft Charla is our platform to connect our community from all over the world. Therefore, we strive to create a safe and open environment for our speakers and guests. We ask everyone, be respectful of everyone else's time and differing opinions, that's allowed. At the same time, please feel free to share on social media. I think we're using the hashtag Loft Charla, okay? So be able to share that again and make more people aware that these events are going on. Okay, so today's charla brings together a group of dynamic and impactful leaders from our community. They will discuss personal and business finance topics in light of COVID-19 and beyond. And our goal today is to give you key takeaways that will help you not only navigate today's economy, but also help you create a plan to best position you for recovery. We will be having Q&A session towards the end of the charla, so please feel free to submit any and all questions in the Q&A window at the bottom of your screen. And some of you guys seem like veterans already. You've already been chatting away, so please continue to chat away. That it is supposed to be engaging in that way. We do want to remind you that if you're going to be chatting, make sure that you have, and you want to share something with everyone, make sure you have it set to be able to chat with the panelists and attendees. Otherwise, it might default to just a panelist and only the panelists will see what you're trying to convey. So that being said, we're going to kick off our charla, and our first speaker is Anna Chavez, the EVP and Chief Growth Officer at the National Council of Aging. Anna, take it away.
Hi, Paul. Hello, everybody. So great to see you. So truly pleased to be included in this amazing opportunity to talk to you about something that I am very, very focused on, not only for myself, not only for my family, but for our community. I want to thank Nationwide for helping to sponsor this event, also to Tony and his amazing staff at HHSF. So what I want to talk about today are three things, and if you can cue the next slide. I want to talk about the context of this conversation. There are three topics I want to cover very briefly. First is you cannot wait to start saving for your future. You've got to do it today. Second, not all of us actually start at the same starting line. And third, public policy will impact your life more than you can imagine. So the first slide, the next slide, I want to cover about starting your future today. For those of you on the screen or watching us virtually, you may not know this, but every day in the United States, 10,000 people turn 65. Many of them didn't think about retirement when they were 25 or 30 or even 35 years old. And they're finding themselves actually living in a situation where they're having a hard time meeting all their needs on a monthly basis. So I'm here to encourage you to start thinking about your retirement today. And that starts by really thinking about how you're investing the dollars you have. I also want to point out that unfortunately for our community, for Latinos and Latinas, 83% of us have nothing saved for retirement. So it's really important that when you start thinking about where you're going to spend your money, think about putting it away for a rainy day. Next slide, please. The second topic I want to cover briefly is that, again, we don't all start at the same starting line. Unfortunately, for women and for women of color, we start our careers with something we call the wealth gap. Unfortunately, because the way society has set up our structure, many of us start earning less than others. And on an annual basis, you may see that throughout the year, we're celebrating, oh, this is the day that Latina women earn the same amount that other people earn. Unfortunately for us, it's halfway through the year. What I'd like to say specifically to Latinas on this conversation today is, please ensure you understand the data around your future. Understand that when you start negotiating for your first wage right out of college, it's really important to ask for what you're worth. In addition, we need to talk to organizations that are employing and advocating for all of those who are employed by us to understand that there's a bias, unfortunately, that follows some of us into our career. And of course, that bias will follow us into retirement. On average, older women enter retirement saving less than men. In addition, Our healthcare costs will continue to increase, and more than likely, we will outlive a partner. So we have to start thinking about our retirement today. Next slide, please. And this is probably the most important topic I want to discuss today, and that's that advocacy matters. For those of us sitting across the country watching as COVID-19 unfortunately disproportionately impacts people in our communities, those of color, those living in poverty, and older adults who are isolated. We have to understand that our voice matters today and tomorrow. So I encourage all of you to understand that as a community, we have a lot to say and a lot to give. When we come out of COVID-19, this country will start thinking about recovery. And what does that mean for us? Certain industries will be disproportionately impacted. People will have been laid off. And so for those of us who have the power to vote, we must vote. For those of us who have an opportunity, we must run for office. And really, it doesn't matter to me whether you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat. You just need to ensure that your vote matters. And also that the issues that impact you at the local level are raised for people who we elect into office every year and every 4 years. So with that, I'll leave you with a couple of takeaways on the next slide. And that's first, don't start thinking about financial planning when you're 40 or 50. I just turned 52 this weekend, and I will tell you that I wish somebody had given me this advice 30 years ago when I started my career right out of law school. I wish I had thought about getting people around me who knew how to give me financial advice and legal advice when I entered my career. 2, specifically to those ladies, don't buy shoes, buy property. Think about what is going to be with you 20 years from now. And if you have young children in your family, think about setting up something to invest in now in their name so that they have other opportunities moving forward. 3rd, really think about your network, not only your social network, but your job network. You know, many of us, unfortunately, are facing a downturn in the economy. Some of us have lost our jobs and are looking for that next opportunity. Hopefully you've kept your network alive and you're being really mindful about who you stay connected with. Think about that today and into the future. And 4th, it's important that all of us elevate invisible data, and that's the data about underserved populations. Again, whether that's people living in poverty today, the fact that there's a wealth disparity gap around women and women of color, and 3rd, that unfortunately that our communities are being impacted by COVID-19 issues in a way that other communities aren't. And so we must, again, advocate for others. And 5th, that ties right into my last point today, is that the public policy debate matters. Where you're employed, how are they investing in public policy issues at the local level? Are they advocating for the right employment rights for all of us? And again, are you putting your name on a ballot to step forward, or are you encouraging others to step forward to make sure your voice and your rights are advocated for? So again, thank you for joining us today. I hope that sets some context to the conversation today. Keep saving, stay joyful, and we'll get through this together.
Thank you so much. It's a great way to kick off this charla as you paved the way with some great points. You know, you're telling us, you know what, now is the time, don't procrastinate, okay? And then I guess my name is Paul, so I'm biased. I pull P's out of your presentation. Don't procrastinate, number 1. Number 2, have a plan. And number 3, be proactive in messaging and doing something for yourself. So thank you for that, laying that out there to start the charla. And with that, we're gonna transition. And I know that some of the questions are already coming through, which is great. And there'll be some room for that again at the end. Please keep coming with your questions. But now we're gonna have Tanya Menendez. She's the CEO, and co-founder of Snowball Wealth. Tanya, please share some insight with us.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Anna. I loved your talk, and I really resonated with a lot of it, especially being a woman of color. I'm going to be going over how the CARES Act and the new stimulus plan is impacting your student loans. And then I'm going to share some advice on how to build an emergency savings. So, next slide. Can you move it to the next one? So the big takeaways on how the stimulus plan is going to impact your student loans, the biggest thing that's going to happen is that all federal loans payments are going to be stopped and your interest rate is going to be 0. This is going to happen automatically. You should not have to contact your servicer to do this, but you have to make sure that your loan is federally owned. The next thing is that employers now receive a tax break when they contribute to your student loans. And so you can likely contact your employer to see if they're willing to offer this benefit or if they already are. And if you're in default, these 6 months of suspended payments are going to count towards the 9 months you need towards loan rehabilitation. So now is a really good time to get back on track if you aren't already. And finally, the collections and wage garnishment, all of that's going to be paused during this time, and it's going to be backdated to March 13th. So if you have student loans and if they're federal, which they likely are, you have this time where you don't have to pay your loans, and it's a really good opportunity to begin building an emergency savings if you don't already have one. So we can move on to the next slide. Oh, and one thing I wanted to share is whenever you're looking for information, make sure that you are using a source that's credible. So I included a source here from the CFPB, which is a .gov site that really does a good job breaking down the details of it if you're looking for more information. Go to the next slide. And so if you don't have a federal loan, and if you have a private loan or if you recently refinanced, you can move on to the next slide. You can contact your lender to see if they're offering any relief programs. Many lenders are offering relief programs during this time, and so it's really good time now to take advantage of any benefits that they're going to provide for you. And also during this time, there are a lot of scammers. So just make sure that you're on the lookout to make sure that you aren't going to be taken advantage of during this time too, because there's a lot of people that will say that your debt is going to magically disappear and enter your bank account information here. And so a lot of these scammers are pretty advanced. And so just make sure that you are being really cautious whenever you're sharing any private information or any bank account information, because I've heard a lot of horror stories around this. And I definitely want to make sure that no one part of this community is being taken advantage of by one of these scammers. And if you are, please contact me personally and I will definitely help you figure it out. And you know, I definitely don't want anyone here to be a part of that. So you can move on to the next slide. So next is an emergency budget. Like Anna mentioned, a lot of Americans today don't have an emergency savings, and now more than ever, especially during a time of crisis, it's important to begin building it up. And if you have this time where you aren't paying your student loans, it's a perfect time to allocate that additional money that you're not paying towards your loans towards building up an emergency savings. One of the first things that you should think about in creating an emergency budget is set like a small goalpost for yourself. I think that if you're at 0 right now, and if you're living month to month, start off with even $100 that you have in emergency savings and begin building it up from there. The goal here is to have at least 6 months of living expenses that you can have in a bank account that's away from your day-to-day spending. So the first thing to do in setting up an emergency budget is analyze your spending. So track your expenses and categorize them into essential, cut back, or cancel. And then assess where you're spending. Find options to be able to shop around, negotiate prices. A lot of phone and internet plans are now, or like credit card, like make sure that you're optimizing on all of those fronts and canceling all unnecessary expenses. And then, like I mentioned before, now that you have this 6-month period where you don't have to pay off your student loans, try to push all of that into an emergency savings so that you can begin building that up. Also, the next step is figure out all your income sources. So you may have received a stimulus check, If you are laid off and qualify for unemployment, definitely take advantage of that. There's no shame in collecting unemployment. This is something that is a federal benefit for you. And so if you qualify, definitely take advantage of it. And during this time, the government has allocated $600 per week on top of what the state is already providing you. So definitely don't have any shame in like being able to collect that check. And then also if you are in debt, make sure that you look at all of your options during this time too, especially if you are able to consolidate or get a lower interest rate in order to give yourself a little bit more relief. Definitely take advantage of that. But if you don't already have an emergency savings, don't panic, and make sure that you start off by setting like small goals for yourself to begin building that up. Feel free to ask any questions during this time related to student debt or building up an emergency savings. And that's it for me.
All right, very good. Thank you, Tanya, so much for that helpful information. So you're going to see a trend as we're building upon each other. We had Anna talk about the do not procrastinate, have a plan, start now. And part of that, having a plan, is what Tanya alluded to, is, how do I create an emergency budget, okay, which is part of a plan? And also, how do I deal with one of the biggest and most stressful factors to a lot of people in this country, which is student debt, okay? We keep hearing the amount of pressure that families and households and individuals face. They got their degree, but now they owe all this money, and student debt, that can be very stressful. So that being said, that's a good transition to our next speaker. I want to introduce to you Natalie Torres-Haddad, who will be speaking to us. She's as an MPA and an award-winning author, and will be speaking to us about some of these pressures when stress comes about. So Natalie, please have at it.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be able to share our story, share our experience with all of you, and seeing such lovely faces in this panel along with all these attendees. And I would recommend all of you, if there's something that resonates with anything that we're telling you, give us a little snap or a high five, whatever, just letting us know that it is feeling with you. I've already learned so much from these ladies, and being able to talk about our mental health and where we stand as far as our financial health actually is something that's correlated with both. So before we get started, I'd like we have more than 300 people on this, and those that are watching us through Facebook, I want all of you to close your eyes. I'm going to walk you through this quick activity that's extremely helpful for you. Close your eyes, and what you're going to do is you're going to inhale for 3, you're going to hold for 3, and then you're going to release for 3. So we're going to do this 3 times. So ready? Inhale, hold, release. Do it again. Hold, release. Last time, take a deep breath. Hold, release. Keep your eyes closed. And I want you to see yourself becoming financially savvy, financially smarter in every single way as you're taking time to learn more about yourself, about your health, and about your financial health. So open your eyes. Every single one of you, you're welcome to raise your hand if this felt. How many of you automatically felt your heart rate drop? Your anxiety just kind of resonate a little less? Well, when we talk about our finances, when we talk about mental health and our money, it has a lot to do with the adrenaline that comes with that. So many of us are feeling this financial stress. We've been very vulnerable and open about what we're going through and what we're seeing our clients go through. It's an emotional drain that many of us might be feeling, especially if you recently lost a job or know someone that's lost a job, or you're possibly thinking that your particular position might be depleting as far as income comes. So I wanted to give you some helpful tips in order to not only stay mentally sane, but be able to also make sure that when you talk about money and when you're talking about financial hardships, it's nothing to be ashamed of, it's nothing to be embarrassed about, and more importantly, it's something that we need to take seriously. And so doing those breath techniques really help not only our health, but help us be present and help us be in the mindset of we're making the right financial moves. So for the next slide, working on our mental health. So right now we're seeing constant, I think it's nonstop news, social media posts about what's going on with COVID, what's going on in the rest of the world. And it's it's something we can't avoid. However, we can take control of how much we're taking in daily as far as how much news we're watching. So make sure you limit that time. For me specifically, there's a specific time at 6 o'clock that I'm watching the news to see what the rest of the day, especially when there's updates. And it seems like now every single day we have more and more changes to programs, as Tanya has talked about, as well as student loans, every type of loan that you probably have. If you have a home, if you own rental property, if you have different investments out there, there's a lot of new structures that are happening within our money. So we have to keep up with that day, and I understand that. But making sure that we limit that intake will help us, one, relieve some of that stress and not feel so overwhelmed by so much information. We've definitely talked a little bit about having a retirement account, a savings account, knowing that you are building up your emergency fund and figuring out how it is that you're going to handle your anxiety, whether it's now or in the future, if you ever find yourself in a financial hardship. This is an important time to know that every little dollar can actually trickle into thousands of dollars that will help you in the future. And for many of us, sometimes that's just having a few months of a cushion that will help relieve some of that anxiety and that stress. The other one I say is practice good physical self-care. A lot of us are finding ourselves sitting in front of a screen almost every single day. For me, lately, it's been more hours because of virtual Zoom or some type of virtual platform that we're using. Make sure that you take into consideration a few walk, maybe a walk a little bit or some kind of exercise. This is the time to make sure that we are keeping our family and ourselves healthy, obviously, and safe, but understanding that when we are not healthy, when we're not physically healthy or mental healthy, we're not going to be able to make those right decisions when it comes to our financial health. We come from a place of emotion. We come from a place of, sometimes a lot of us, especially Latinos, Hispanics, we brought up in kind of that scarcity mentality. So if we don't necessarily check ourselves and see where we are as far as our anxiety level and where our mental health is, we might continue to practice in that sense. And we want to come from a place where we know that we're making sure that we're being financially healthy. Now, find outlets to talk about it. Today's charla has been months in planning, and obviously all of us were really excited to be able to do this, at least virtually, even though originally it was going to be at live events throughout the country. I'm really thankful that Nationwide and been able to do this, because now at least we have people that are not only providing expertise advice, they're giving us information that maybe some of us feel might be only one feeling this, or is my situation very unique? And every single one of you, you're probably experiencing some form of financial hardship or anxiety towards it. So we want to make sure that we connect with other people that not only going to educate us, but are going to root us on, keep us accountable. And it's just being able to keep ourselves part of that, what we call our tribes, or people that are our mentors, our supporting group, and say, where are you on your plan? Because I don't want people to come to me and say, you know what, during that time, I was so freaked out. I pulled out all my money. I made some expenses that I shouldn't have because of the financial stress I was under. How do I fix it? And ideally, you want to have someone or a group of people to be able to keep you accountable and say, you're being able to talk to us about your worries, you're being able to talk about what your goals are, because you also want to think about your finances, your financial health as a long-term thing. It's not something that is overnight, and it takes time to get there. For the next slide, please. Now, we have to schedule it in. This sounds kind of like we've heard this many times, but schedule a time and date with yourself to keep yourself mentally stable as well as the financial health side of it. And being able to track your expenses, find out what your budget is something that you should be doing. At least if you could do it weekly for now, that's perfect, because times are changing so fast. But ideally do a date with yourselves twice a month. And this is when you're paying your bills and just enjoying the process of knowing that you're taking some control of what you can of your finances. This will help you stay mentally healthy, mentally aware of what's going on in your immediate family. And acknowledge your financial status. We've been talking about so many people, more than half of Americans don't even have $400 in their bank account. And especially for students, I know this is a really difficult time for them as well, but it's okay to own up where your financial status is right now, knowing that every day, if you're building some sort of saving or wealth, or just $1 a day can make that difference. Keeping calm. Overall, how do you do that? Like I said, connect with people, especially people on this panel. We will do our best to provide as much information, whether it's free to low cost. And know that there's a lot of organizations that will provide you mental health that is correlated with the financial health side of it. So if you don't have the money for a therapist, there's tons of nonprofits. There's tons of therapists that are doing free to low cost therapy one-on-one session, because sometimes just getting it out there and just saying what's going on mentally will help you make yourself stable, a lot more calm, and being able to make those right financial decisions. And last but not least, explain why this time has to have a financial plan together. This is a place for you to have that conversation with your family and your friends to say, okay, this is where I stand financially. What is it that I can do to make sure I prepare myself for the future? And I believe there's one more slide. Knowing that you're not alone and making sure that you create that environment to be able to pay your bills, breathe, take that in consideration that you are not alone in this process, and providing gratitude every single time. Write down what you're grateful for today. I'm grateful for this chat today to be able to have this conversation and learn from all these experts. Balancing and saving your emergency is what's going to help you pay down your debt and feel more comfortable. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to getting a lot of those questions in too. Thanks, Paul.
Very good, Natalie. Thank you so much. And again, we're seeing a progression here. Okay, so we had Anna start off with the immediacy of now, getting something done now, having a plan, and then Tanya jumped right into it, saying part of the way to start that plan is have an emergency fund. If you can start diffusing some of the biggest stress factors, such as student loans, that's a great way. Have a strategy for that, but that becomes stressful. Okay, and money decisions, are not good when you're full of stress and anxiety. So Natalie comes in and says, look, first you had to just breathe and calm down. Okay, and that's something that obviously is very helpful. As I'm seeing feedback from people saying, I feel better already. But the importance of making financial decisions on a rational basis with peace of mind and saying, okay, I'm going to calm down emotionally. So I have the privilege and honor to be able to actually be the next speaker. Before I start, though, I want to remind you, we're going to have Q&A questions that will be addressed at the end. So please fill in the Q&A bubble there with all the questions you have so that we can hopefully address your questions at the end of the presentation. So when we see you asking, we'll get to you near the end of the presentation. Now, I do have the challenge to be the speaker with the most slides, okay, and have about 8 minutes to get through this. So hang on, guys. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I'm passionate about this because, again, as a Latino from Brooklyn, I see that my parents didn't know how to equip me with a lot of the tools that I've been blessed to acquire over the years and share with other colleagues and professionals. So a big question that I'm in charge of addressing is like, okay, Anna talked about having a plan and investing now, and don't buy shoes, but invest or buy, it's the investing side. How do we do that? And the questions that we see coming up. So how do we do this? Now, I will disclaim this. Before you even start investing, you should have a few things in place. And I say this because as a financial planner, you can hurt yourself if you don't have a good foundation and start jumping into investments. As you heard Tanya say, you should have a well-funded emergency fund. People in this age, during these times, this pandemic, who have good savings are not as stressed, whether they're being downsized, whether they're taking pay cuts, etc. I have emergency funds. That's the purpose of it, to rely on, so they don't have to stress so much about it, as to Natalie's point, okay? So you should have a well-funded emergency fund, ideally 6 months of living expenses. You should have no consumer debt. It's interesting, I was on the call last week with, I think it was Visa, and I was like, I don't want to attack Visa, but if you can stay away from consumer debt, credit cards, we call that bad money, money being charged against you. Try to get rid of that, because before you start investing is not guaranteed, but interest on your credit cards is. Okay, so we would say try to stay away from consumer debt before you start investing. And thirdly, make sure, as Tanya was talking about having a budget, make sure you have positive monthly cash flow. A question I get so often, or people who come to my office over the last 20 years, Paul, I don't know where my money goes at the end of the month. And I tell them, if you don't know, I'm going to know less. Okay, but it's really important that you become the master of your money, not that money masters you. Okay, so you need to take control of that and make sure that instead of having a negative, let's get rid of that and have a positive monthly cash flow. So you should have these 3 things in place before you start investing. Go ahead, next slide. Once you have these 3 things in place, okay, there's certain things that you have, I'm going to go over some terms that you should start learning or becoming familiar with if you're not an investor. And even if you are, these are always considerations. What is your risk tolerance? Are you afraid? People tell me, Paul, I want the highest return with 0 loss. I said, well, there's a fairy tale book called When I Wish Upon a Star, but that's not going to happen, okay? Investing means there's going to be risk, okay? If not, that's called savings. And that's what emergency funds are for, okay? Very little risk. But investing means how much risk are you willing to take? That's called risk tolerance. Time horizon. How much time do I have to tap into investing? Investing normally requires, depending on type of investments, X amount of time for it to develop because it has ups and downs. People say, I want to invest money to save for a house next year. My friends, that's not investing. That's saving for a down payment, and keep that in a safe place. Do not put that in the market, okay? So typically time horizon needs to be greater than 3 to 5 years for you to actually think about investing that money, okay? Current liquidity. if you don't have emergency funds, if you don't have enough liquid money, it's hard to put it into that money into savings, because you don't know if something is needed, such as these times. All of a sudden you have to liquidate the money, which is usually down during the pandemic at the worst time, in order to meet your current needs for cash, okay? And then you should also have a familiarity with economic environments and markets. Become a student, because you have to read and educate yourself and associate yourselves with people who know. And be careful when I say associate yourself. The #1 financial advisor is either my uncle or my coworker at the water cooler. And typically they're not the most well-versed, and their circumstances are different. So make sure you have good sources, as Tanya was mentioning, to find out about economic environments and markets. So let's say you have all this in place, okay? People right now are saying, go ahead, next slide, are saying, what should I be doing? The market's dropping, it's so volatile. Well, here's a reality check. So yes, the S&P 500, which I'll use as the market, dropped 34% from its high in February this year to its low in March this year. That is the highest drop in 1 month in history, with one other exception to that historical happening, okay? So people see that 34% drop, say, oh my goodness, it's the worst time to invest, that is scary, that's ridiculous, let me get you out. Well, yes, but let's take a look at perspective, okay? Since the beginning of the year, since January, the market, as of this morning, before the market opened, was down 11%. So that means when the market tanked, okay, down 34% from its high, it's already recouped a bunch, okay? And remember I said time horizon is important, because this is not for the faint of heart, risk tolerance, and number two, for someone who's trying to make a short-term win. It's gonna go up and down. In the last 12 months, if you look at the market, it's actually only down 1.9%, the S&P. So if you're a long-term investor, you're saying, you know what, that's not so bad in a year, okay? Given that I'm a long-term investor. In the last 5 years, the S&P is actually up 37% aggregate, okay? So matter of perspective, when you're investing, we cannot have a myopic look, a short-term look on investing, because you will drive yourself crazy, and you're gonna need Natalie to help you de-stress and decompress, okay? So let me give you some perspective on where the market is today. And here's a picture of that, okay? If you look at what the market has done, here's since about 1980 till this year, you see it's gone up and down. And not that I need you to understand the technicalities behind this, but this includes in 1987, a 33% drop in the crash, okay? It includes a tech bubble crash in 2000, 2002, 47% drop. 2008, financial crisis, 57% drop. So those will happen. However, if you look at the long-term picture, since when you include all those three drops in the same time frame, the market's up over 2,000% since 1981's low, okay? And if you look at the last 10, 11 years, right after the market crash, the market's up 260%. That's not a bad return. But again, this is time horizon is critical. You don't invest for 1 or 2 years, okay? The problem is, as we talked about, you have to have peace of mind. Is if the market does this, great, let's go out and do it, but you have to be careful, because the #1 enemy of investing is typically yourself. Next slide. This is what we see happening, okay, when people try to invest. Things start going up, and I'm gonna go from left to right, and people get optimistic and excited, and wow, I feel great about this investment, and there's some psychological terms here which are real of what people experience. So they hit this top, okay, they say, let me get in, wow, real estate is hot, my neighbor got one this, and they start buying stuff. Then things start going down, which happened in the real estate market in 2008. It's happened now in the stock market, happened in the stock market 2000. And you're like, uh-oh, I don't know if I like this. I'm getting scared here. As you start fearing, you start getting depressed, you panic, and at the bottom, you say, get me out, and you start selling, okay? And then markets turn around, because they did in 2008, and I'm sure they will eventually here as well, and you start to cycle over again. Is this the way to invest? Absolutely not, because there's an old adage that says we're supposed to buy low and sell high. And what this chart shows, and I just explained, is just the opposite. People buy high when they're excited, and they sell low when they're nervous. And to prove this point, next slide, there's a study that's been shown it's called the Dalbar study, that talks about consumer behavior and returns. If someone bought the S&P 500 and just held it over X amount of time, what they would have earned, that's the orange line, okay? And you can see the orange line is higher than the blue line being what investors actually did earn, who invested in the stock market, okay? So remember I said longer time horizon. If you look at a 20-year time frame, the average S&P returned about 8-9% annually over that time frame, yet the average investor earned half of that, okay? Why? Because of that roller coaster that I just finished showing you, okay? We are our worst enemy. So next slide. So there's takeaway #1 is investing should not be driven by emotions. You have to be objective. Warren Buffett said, if you cannot control your emotions, you cannot control your money. Okay, and this is why, and this is, I'm not trying to plug me, but having an advisor can be helpful, or someone, an accountability partner, because we tell people, listen, I can do something you can't. I can be objective about your money because it's not my money. Okay, so takeaway number one. Takeaway number two, if you go ahead, and I'm going to go right quick through this, is dollar cost averaging and rebalancing. This is critical. These are definitions of dollar cost averaging. You'll get a copy of the slide. But dollar cost averaging is when you actually take a sum of money, and instead of dumping it in, you start slowly piecing that money into the market. Ups and downs, you're buying, whether it's up or down, okay? That makes a huge difference, okay, in long-term returns. And rebalancing, if you know this is my risk allocation, when the market just tanked and bonds went up this year, it was really good for people to sell some of the bonds and buy the stocks to get it back. That's called rebalancing. Next slide. Here's an example of how that makes sense. Let's say you had $100,000. Okay, and you invested that money at the beginning of 2000, September 2000, and you did nothing else. You just invested it, okay, in the S&P 500, and you let that money ride for 11 years in this chart. At the end of the 11 years, you had the same $100,000 and $98 in addition. The market went up and down. Your money stayed steady. You didn't really earn anything. Okay, that's a lot of time wasted. But let's say instead of dumping the $100,000 in, you started equal installments. Putting $10,000 a year for those 10 years. Next slide, please. Over the same time frame, your $100,000 would have grown to almost $120,000, 20% differential. Okay, so this is the power of being able to rebalance and to dollar cost average into the market, or any investment for that matter. So the next slide, takeaway number two: intentional and strategic rebalancing can make a huge difference in your portfolio. And then the last takeaway, because I'm over my time here, is asset allocation is part of an investment strategy and a plan. You should have a personal plan. You heard Anna say this in the beginning. You heard Tanya mention in the beginning, and then Natalie also mentioned it in the middle. Okay, is once you feel calm, have a plan. All investing, all that should be part of a plan and strategy. So that being the case, I leave you with the three takeaways. Do not let emotions get in the way of investing. Rebalancing is powerful, and investing should be part of the plan. Thank you. And with that, I'm quickly going to transition over to Nick. Nick is he's a president of Black Pen Whiteboard, and he's going to show us some calculations that are essential for small business owners and entrepreneurs that will be helpful in moving forward. Nick, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. You know, there are millions of entrepreneurs that are looking for the same thing right now: capital, liquidity. You're hearing a lot about programs like the PPP and EIDL. You know, in the next few minutes, I want to share a tool from my playbook that's going to increase the likelihood, and whether that cash comes from a bank loan or an equity investor, mastering this tool is going to help you make the case that you're deal ready. The tool is the cash flow model, and you can see it on your screen. You see, a cash flow model is simply a summary of money coming in and money going out that illustrates if we have more or less cash than we need at the end of a period of time. That's it. And the power of the model is the clarity it provides you around timing and the amount of cash on hand. So let's go under the hood and see how this works. The first thing we're going to want to do is zoom in on our screen. And what I'm going to start with here is the cash balance alert minimum, which is simply a fancy way of identifying the level of cash that you need before you start freaking out. And that's real. And we talked about some of our emotions and money. And in running a business, there are certainly these psychological thresholds around cash. And so I like to start with the minimum. As you can see here in this model, we've entered in $100,000. The second step is to identify the amount of cash that you have on hand. This is where we either go to our balance sheet and look at the cash line item, or we go into our checking account and see how much money we have. This is the amount of money that we have today. You see, where this exercise really gets going is we're looking into the future. And in this particular illustration, we're going into the future on a monthly basis. So I want to point you to month one. And in month one, what you can see in this model is this first row basically has the cash on hand at the beginning of the month. So because I have $200,000 in my bank account today, I have $200,000 at the beginning of month one. Okay, now we can get into the first component of the actual model, which is money coming in. Now, as you guys know, as entrepreneurs, there's a number of ways that money comes in, but there are two principal ways. Either you sell stuff this month and you get paid this month, or you're getting paid this month for stuff that you sold in a prior period. So in this illustration, what I'm showing you is a business that had sales for services or products that they sold this month, and they actually got paid this month. And it just so happens that another part of this business model, they also render services, but sometimes it takes their customers 30 days to pay them. When you extend credit to your customers, as many of you do, that is going to show up in your financial statements as a receivable. Someone owes you money, but they eventually pay you. In this month one illustration, what you're seeing is $50,000 from services rendered this month that I got paid on, and then another $50,000 of cash that's come in for services that were rendered previously. Now, what happens in the model is we then total up the dollars coming in. So in month one, you can see $100,000 came in between those two activities. The other thing I'll just point out as a tangent is that everything in blue, by the way, this model is going to be shared with everyone, everything in blue can be modified. So if for whatever reason there are other sources of cash coming into the business, you can certainly enter them in. For simplistic purposes, what you're seeing here is $100,000 came in month one. Now keep in mind, I started the month with $200,000, right? So that means over the course of the month, we would have had $300,000 at our disposal. So that's money in. Let's talk about the other end of the equation, which is money out, right? So money out is just that. It's things that you are spending to keep your business thriving. In this particular illustration, I want to point you again to month one, and we have three expenses that we're having outflows for. The first one is cost of goods sold, and that's simply what it costs in order for me to sell those services that I rendered this month. The other thing is I have a team, so I have payroll, and payroll is obviously cash out, and I also have cash going out for my rent. You can see the summation of all of those operating expenses, right, which I'm paying cash for, is $125,000. Now, as you know, sometimes we have cash going out of our account that's not just related to running the business. Some of us have loans, and so we've modeled in a loan for $10,000 a month. And then some of us actually take a draw on the business, so there's another $10,000 for the owner. As you can see here, we are already running into a bit of a precarious situation because we've only brought in $100,000, but yet $145,000 has gone out, leading to a monthly net cash flow of negative $45,000. That's not good. We know that. But here we started with $200,000, so we have $155,000 left over. The way this exercise works is you go into your crystal ball and you project out months 2 and beyond. In this particular illustration, what you can see is red numbers. A number becomes red when it's below the cash balance alert minimum. This is when I become concerned. So I know I'm going to be concerned in month 4. The other thing that is noteworthy here is the degree to which we have negative numbers in this top row. And let me draw the link to raising capital. These are cash deficits in this business. And what we want to do in raising capital is we look to identify the low point in the projection. In this case, the low point is $160,000. So this means I'm $160,000 short running my business. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a case to go raise $160,000, but not just $160,000. I shared with you previously that I become concerned if I have less than $100,000. So my actual capital need is going to be the low point, $160,000, plus my freakout level, or that cash balance alert minimum of $100,000. Combine the two, that's $260,000. Now I can go to a bank. Now I can go to a private lender. I can go to an equity investor and say, I need $260,000, and I can illustrate to them how and why I'm deal ready. And for illustrative purposes, let me just show you, if we had that $260,000 on top of the $200,000 we already have today, I'm just going to add that in. You can see that we don't have any red any longer, and that I do not go below my cash balance alert minimum. So this is a really powerful tool to illustrate to entrepreneurs the timing of their cash flows, also the timing of potentially psychologically concerning moments, and it also illustrates to potential capital partners that you're ready for their support. I look forward to your questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, Nick. And again, thank you so much to all the panelists who shared this great information. We hope that, and we're hearing comments that this is being helpful. So that's the whole point, to give you some tips, some nuggets that you can take and apply to your respective situations, and hopefully do something, as Anna mentioned, now to start heading for a better future. So that being said, and as promised, please keep sending in questions. We have several questions here. And hopefully you saw the flow of what happened. Anna kicked it off with saying you have to not procrastinate, do something about it now, have a plan. Tanya then talked about the emergency fund and getting rid of student loans or doing something about that to restructure it. And we had Natalie talk about the stress and how to make sure we don't go through stress in these times. I talked about investing and what that might look like and some do's and don'ts. And then Nick brought it to a more macro level, from the enterprise and the entrepreneur level, and understanding that just because it's entrepreneur doesn't mean it doesn't relate to you, as a lot of Latinos have closely held corporations. So what happens at the business level trickles right down to the owner, depending on the business structure. So these tools that he presented are critical. This tool that he presented is critical. So that being said, we're going to jump into some of these questions right here. And I don't know if one of the panelists wants to do this. What are your thoughts on refinancing your mortgage for a lower rate? And I know we have several panelists, so, and I can see all the panelists. If you want to take it, please just raise your hand and go for it. Go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, and obviously it's general. You want to speak to your CFP or CPA to make sure you're in the right. But right now might be a good time, depending if you're looking at a lower interest rate, and then also really what it's going to be, as far as some of you might have a mortgage insurance, right? Your PMI. So that could be a good opportunity for when to get out of that PMI and lower your interest rates. But also kind of a tip I always tell people: don't go in refinancing your house in order to take out money. The whole point is you want to build equity in your home. You want to be able to have less debt and continue to pay it down. So look at your options and shop around if you're going to do a refinance. Don't just go with the one lender you've always gone with, because right now you can shop around. There's some really good deals. I've seen the best interest rates that I've actually ever seen. So this is something to keep and make sure your credit score is up to date in order to make sure you qualify for some of these great refinances. So that's kind of my 2-bit with it, but it could be a really great time, especially when we see the market changing. And so you want to make sure you get in that lock rate now as a fixed interest rate, not a variable.
That's right. Anybody else want to add to that? I will say, to add to that she's exactly on point. You know, some numerical parameters. Normally, if you can get less than 2% from where your current loan is at, that's typically a good barometer to use. Obviously, you're trying to minimize closing costs. So because there probably closing costs, you want to make sure this is not a house that you're going to leave in 2 years, because you will have wasted those closing costs. Okay. So time that you're going to be in that house, and if you can lower that interest rate by a couple of points, and as Natalie said, if you have a variable loan, this is a great way to lock in a fixed rate, because when you have a fixed rate, it's a better way to budget, as to what Tanya was saying, you know, so because you know what that expense is going to be versus it floating in a rising interest rate environment, which that's the only direction it can head in the future, because we probably can't go much lower than we're at today. So thank you for that question. So let's see here. It says, I lost my job and want to take my side gig as a yoga teacher online, monetize my videos, and create community. Where can I get a micro loan? The CARES Act doesn't apply to me. I already asked my lender. Oof, that's more of a banking question. Anybody have something they can say about that? Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I would suggest you Google CDC in your respective geography. These are nonprofit organizations that have the capacity to arrange financing in approachable amounts. And what's interesting is you can get a loan, and the loan is not based on your business history, which you wouldn't have if it's a new venture, but it's based on your personal credit. So I'm in LA, so I would Google Los Angeles CDC, and I'm actually gonna get a number of organizations that pop up, and I would go there as my first touch base for some counseling.
Very good.
Right.
Natalie, go ahead.
And also, I love that the CDC and the SBAs, right, that they have these free workshops online as well. So if you're starting out a new business, this is a great way to get your business plan. A lot of the legal advice, anything that you can for free, because technically as taxpayers, we're already paying for that service. So like he said, and then if you're starting out a yoga, if you started doing telesessions, I've seen a lot of people doing that, getting yourself enough clients, and, you know, before shopping around for big loans, just to make sure you're going to be profitable in it too. So best of luck as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. So another question, it says, I know this is not directly related to the topic shared in the charla, but it's financial related. Okay. But what are your thoughts on credit card churning? How about starting right before taking out loans for 4-year education? Anyone want to address credit card churning and loans for 4-year education? Well, I'll pipe in on that. And the whole mantra between credit card churning is I get offers in the mail that say 0% for the next 12 months. So I just transfer balances right now, one to the other till you pay them all off. In theory, that's a great idea. Okay, because mathematically, if you have zero balance that controls the interest and you're paying no interest, that's awesome. In my over 2 decades of being a financial advisor, I have seen a very small percentage of people who do that successfully. Okay, it gives you something else to worry about, to be on top of. And again, as you heard today, there's so many aspects of finances. Okay, I mean, if you're not convinced of that, just print out Nick's spreadsheet and just put that on the refrigerator. Finances can be complicated. Okay, so you want to try to simplify, minimize, the activity that you have to mess with. Okay, there's a book called The Automatic Millionaire. He talks about doing everything automatic, putting direct draft and deposit. Simplify it because it's already complicated enough. So does it make sense theoretically? Yes. Does it work practically? I haven't seen it happen too often.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree too. And I'll also add that the benefit to taking out a student loan, especially if it's federal, is that you get these federal benefits where you can pause payments, you can go into deferment or forbearance. They also have income-based repayment if you can't pay it off in time. So there's a lot of benefits to these federal loans, and especially if you can get a subsidized loan where you don't accrue interest for the duration of your loan. So those are some of the big benefits. So I wouldn't see a federal student loan as worse than. I definitely think that a federal student loan is better than taking out a credit card. For absolutely would not advise to take out a credit card debt to pay off your college.
Very good. Hopefully that helps. Thank you for that question. This might be, I think, a very direct Nick question, but would you recommend spending the money to become an LLC if you're starting a new venture, or trying it out and seeing if it truly sticks? Is there a liability issue?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. My general thought is to do things the right way. And what you want to do is go through the proper mechanisms to set up if you're going to hang out your shingle, you want to make sure that you're fully aware of all the rules and regulations. Obviously, there's a cost associated with it, but the cost to establish an LLC is really not material in the grand scheme of things. So I would recommend, if you're serious about operating your business, that you talk to an attorney, that you set up things the right way. And I'll draw the distinction between setting up a business and setting up a hustle. So if you want to go out there and make a couple bucks and hustle, have at it. But if you have visions of actually scaling something, I'm going to recommend that you be fundamentally sound and do things the right way.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. So Suzette is asking, I'm a young professional starting on my personal finance investment journey. Thankfully, I have a secure job and want to start investing now. Do you recommend starting at this moment despite the current market? Obviously, I would be happy to answer this question unless another panelist wants to jump in first. Go ahead, Anna.
Well, I'm gonna pivot just a little, and this may not be for everybody on the call today, but absolutely, this is the time to invest if you have money to do so. If you're already able to make your monthly needs. However, I'm also going to make a pitch for those who are going without. For those of us who do have an opportunity, perhaps it's just as little as $10 a month. Many nonprofits across the country are having to lay off staff, are unable to serve certain individuals in the community because donations have stopped. Many nonprofits around the country have canceled their annual fundraising events. And so I know this is about a charla about investing in ourselves and our future, but I also believe it's upon us to invest in our communities and for those who are going without today. So again, it could be, you can consider it a tax write-off, but again, I'm talking from the heart. Right now, we have kids going without meals, older adults isolating by themselves in their house. And so again, if you have an opportunity, you're looking for that, please check out nonprofits in your area. Make sure that they're certified, that they're 501c3s. But again, a lot out there to donate to right now.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Natalie. You want to add to that?
Yeah, and then for those that are thinking about investing in real estate, whether it's going to be a rental property or for yourself, we're going to see a market change, or it is already happening. So this could be a great opportunity for those that are looking to make income in that sense. So when people talk about, is it time to invest? I would definitely keep an eye out for the end of the year, as a lot of homes will become, their values are going to drop, and we're going to see a lot of more on the market. So it's going to be better of a buyer's market than a seller's market.
Yeah, and I will, I guess, round that question off with another question that said, I was thinking of dropping my percentage of my 401k, so they're looking to invest more based on what's going on, and maybe cutbacks on the payroll or things of that nature. Two things. Remember, investing needs to be in the context of your plan. So if you don't have enough money to live, yeah, stop investing. Okay. And if you have emergency funds, all that type of stuff. But if the question is coming from a point of fear, remember we talked about emotions, oh my God, everything's dropping. This is when wealthy people get wealthier people. Okay, just so you know, I'm a big fan of Warren. I follow Warren Buffett's investing models because I have to. The guy is buying stuff like crazy, and he was for the last few weeks. Okay, why? He knows things are on sale. But last week I mentioned that the stock market is the only place where everything goes on sales and people run out the door. So this is a time when you cannot let fear drive your emotions. It is a time when to really live up to buying low so that eventually you can sell high. So if that's where the question is coming from, hopefully that will help to say, when is the best time to invest? I'll go back to Anna today. We don't know if this is the lowest, the highest, but if you have a long-term plan, it's going to go up and down. I can guarantee that, as an investment person. But as long as you're constantly putting something in there, you should hopefully come out okay at the end. Okay. So I think we have time for just a couple more questions. Do you have any books or podcasts you recommend to learn more about being more financially savvy as an investment, savings, emergency planning, etc.? Oh, you guys, I'm sure we have a library. I mean, look at behind Natalie, there's a library of books. But go ahead, guys. Anybody want to add books to the to the conversation?
Yeah, podcasts, I'm a big fan of them because they're free resources. Obviously, I'm a plug mine, Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes, but there's tons out there like Stacking Benjamins, Popcorn Finance, and these are the ones that you can, listen to daily, free, being able to educate yourself quickly. Some of my top favorite books is Think and Grow Rich. I always let people know it's one of my favorite. I think it's a seller. And then Rich Dad, Poor Dad, especially as a Hispanic culture, I think there's something that we sometimes have. Our language is very different too when we see how the wealthy live. And so this is a good book, but I'd be happy to send a whole list. I have tons of books that I love to read. So yeah.
Yeah, and also you guys should look out for an email from Hispanic Heritage Foundation, because there's going to be a podcast with Natalie and I on financial foundations that we're really excited to be rolling out in the next few weeks. So definitely be on the lookout for that too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And now there's, again, I'm sure that with the brain trust that's speaking to you today, there's probably all kinds of podcasts and books and resources there. So be on the lookout for that. If I get asked specifically about investing books, and that's a tough one for me because, again, I am biased, and do-it-yourself investing can be kind of scary. Okay, but I did say you should familiarize yourself with economic markets and with how markets work at investing. So there's a couple of books that I consider like the Bible of books in the investing world. One's called The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. This is one that these aren't easy reading, I'll be honest with you, but they are, Warren Buffett says that's the Bible of investing, The Intelligent Investor. There's also one by Warren Buffett called The Essays of Warren Buffett. These are actually letters that he wrote to his shareholders every year. And we read those in my company every year to kind of see what he's thinking of the economy, what he thinks things are going. And the last one is called Irrational Exuberance. That's by Robert Schiller. And it talks about how, we think oh, yes, I can do this and I'm irrational. But we talked about that emotional factor and how investors become very irrational when it comes to investing, whether it's real estate, business ownership, etc. Okay, so I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. And let's see here. Okay, I'm trying not to just do investment questions, if that's okay, because we have a few of those. Okay, here you go. I am soon to be a graduate student, fortunately, without any undergraduate loan debt. I have savings, but they are going to be allocated for the application process and relocation process. I will be needing to take out loans this time around. So how would I go about being financially smart and even saving during this time where I'm going to be in $200,000 plus of debt by the end of 4 to 5 years? Anyone want to address that question? So this person's going to be in over $200,000 of debt.
I would say make sure that you are taking out the debt that you absolutely need, because sometimes people, like the way that the system works is that you're just allocated debt, and sometimes more than you need, and so you're actually, especially graduate school debt, tends to have higher interest. So just make sure that you take out only what you need, and you can start by looking at your budget and all of the expenses and seeing if that's the amount that you need, and if there's any other income that you'll have that will contribute to the expenses that that will reduce the amount of loans that you'll take out, because that interest continues to accrue as like throughout the time that you're going to school.
Very good, very good. All right, someone actually piped in saying, adding on to the whole, should I reduce my 401k? Okay, they added a different circumstance. I don't think the last question that says, I'm looking to buy my first property, assuming my finances are in order. Should I reduce my investment in my 401k to boost money for a down payment, or should I maintain my 401k amount? That's a great question. Natalie, you have your hand up.
I'll do that from personal experience. My very first rental property I bought, I was 24, didn't come from money. And I had to do that, make that decision of pulling back from a retirement. And I needed enough of a down payment for a rental property. So I am really glad I did that, because very few people were doing that at that time. And I think sometimes it's like right now, people are either just deciding whether to build an emergency fund. Make sure you have that as well. If you are thinking of doing a rental property, it's not just a down payment you have to save up for, it's for fix-ups. Some rental properties, chances are you're not going to buy it new. It's going to need a lot of fix-ups. For me, it's always been fix-ups because it's expensive where I live. I'm in LA, but even out of state as well. So having not just a down payment, but enough for the fix-ups, and understand that you might not have a tenant right away. If you're planning to live in it and rent it out to another room, or someone else as a roommate, that can be an option. But also connect with people that are investors. That's something I talk about all the time, is my investing journey as well. But find out what they did and hopefully their mistakes, and learn from that to make sure you don't do that, because this is an opportunity. There's a documentary, 2 movies I recommend. One is Boom Bust Boom, which talks about the just the market in general, and The Big Short, which talks about before the crash of last 2008. So you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're like, I invested and I didn't know what I was doing. But I do recommend it, not just from personal experience, but I've seen many people do that, especially if you're young. It all depends. Nick talked about your risk tolerance. For me, it was something that I thought, well, I have plenty of time to continue to invest in my retirement. But at that moment, I needed enough to make sure I had for that down payment and for fix-ups.
Very good. So Natalie, since you talked about this, this will be the last question we take. I'm sorry, there's a lot of great questions here, but it says, so let's say there's enough cash flow to purchase the house outright. Is it wise to purchase the house cash, or is it better to get a mortgage?
So I've done both, right? So there's pros and cons to both. And that's why I always tell people, make sure you talk to your CPA and your CFP to see what's best for you. So I'll keep it general. If you do all cash, obviously you have that opportunity that you're going to get a return right away on your rentals, right? So you're going to have some income coming in per month and not having to worry about a mortgage. The pros and cons of both is obviously if you have a mortgage, that you don't have to worry so much about using that cash towards your, maybe saving towards your retirement, having some of an emergency fund or for fix-ups. So you really have to see where you stand. And I think also with cash, there's different tax benefits and obviously some setbacks that you might have if you have a mortgage. But the cool thing, if you do, I've done it as well as outright cash. And what I ended up doing about 2 years later into it, I wanted to purchase another one. So I wanted to make sure I basically started to finance that one and took out that money, which I had built so much equity, and that allowed me to use that in order to purchase something else. So you can always go back and say, you know what, I paid for it cash, but I would like to take out a mortgage on it. So making sure you find out what your market is, if it's worth the cash. Like for LA compared to out of state, for somewhere in the Midwest, it's going to be very different to be able to pay all cash as opposed to trying to do that here. But understand, Nick and everyone's been talking about having a little liquid cash. So not just your emergency fund, but having a retirement in place as well, a retirement plan, excuse me, And so there's definitely benefits for both. So it just depends on the person, but hopefully that gives you a little more insight of where you're thinking of in the long term, but there are some benefits.
Awesome, thank you. And so we're running out of time here. I'm going to wrap this up with a great word that I always use, and Natalie says, it depends. Okay, and why do I say that? Because everyone's circumstance is different. Okay, and Anna mentioned this. There's people that are looking to aggressively, they're in that building stage and invest, but there are others that might be in the give back stage. And what do we do about that, especially in times like these? So everything here has to be taken on a personal basis. Be well informed. See what makes sense for you. We just had two very extreme questions of someone: should I stop saving to raise down payment? Yeah, in a lot of places, if you don't put 20% down, you get tacked on with this thing called PMI insurance, which is the biggest waste of money in my mind, unless you work any part in any insurance companies who are listening. But aside from that, and is it investment property? Is it personal residence? Personal residence is not a lot of tax breaks if you're not itemizing anymore. So it all depends. But I think everything you've heard today can be taken back and say, okay, this applies to me, this doesn't. But, hey, primo, this applies to you. You might want to look at this. That being said, that's all the time we have for Q&A. But please note, this charla is being streamed via Facebook Live. So you'll be able to go there, watch it again, or refer friends and family to do that. There were some questions about, Latinas. Are there any Latinas that have written books on this? Anna mentioned this. We are very underrepresented. That's why I'm so proud to be on a panel with a bunch of Latinos, because in our industry in finance, we're so underrepresented in this world. So yes, here's some people that could be great resources for you. Please refer people to Facebook Live. Share with your networks. We'll be also following up with the links to today's recorded session, so you'll have access to it as well, okay? So please look out for that. Before we end the charla, I'd like to welcome back Antonio Tijerino, who will be sharing a few last words.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, Anna, Tanya, Natalie, Paul, obviously, and Nick. Wow, you all brought it, and I learned so much. I'm also grateful that you broke it down so I was able to understand a lot of this complicated information that normally flies right over my head. To quote Tupac, you all let the knowledge drop. So it was also comforting in listening to experts offering hope during these uncertain, anxious times. Emergency savings, planning ahead, making choices to save. There's so many things we can actually do to mitigate the impact of this crisis on us. And thank you for not letting us feel helpless during this COVID catastrophe. I don't have much money, so I better make the most of what I do have. And once again, thank you Nationwide and Lou Yarbrough for your support. Thank you HHF team and Nationwide team for putting this charla together. This is just the start of our work in the financial empowerment arena, so please stay tuned. We will be building on this. HHF and Nationwide is going to be releasing a series of videos and podcasts this summer with more helpful hints and ideas, and featuring the amazing Natalie and Tanya. And thank you again, everyone, for being on El Zoom and joining us. And please stay tuned for our next charla. The upcoming topics are extremely relevant and compelling. Stay safe, stay connected. In this time of social distancing, we don't have to feel alone. Sending you all abrazos. Thank you.